can hear you now. How are you?
All right, man. No, good, good. Well, let's cut to the chase.
Yep.
Um, uh, Thanks for sending this stuff on. And I mean, what I'd sort of suggest is that the material is there. I think just in some elements, it's still about syntax, so sentence structure, format, structure. You're inclined to make assertions without kind of backing those up.
Yeah, I think it's
I always kind of come in my head, and I don't mean that in a bad, I mean this in the most constructive way, that I always ask myself, how do I know that?
Mm-hmm.
So like really it's not me, I think I mentioned I had a chapter deadline, and so like I have to also, so literally I'm doing that as well, do you know? So it's not just me having a go at you.
Yeah, no, I understand.
So I write something and then I go, how do you know that? So just to be mindful of that, I think, just referencing, and also I just wondered more generally, Henry, as you write, that if you've got somebody who can read this for you.
Yeah.
So like, again, sort of personally, I've got a partner who suffers also in ways of being asked sometimes to read stuff on my part.
Yeah.
And he's like, Daddy's got better grammar than I do when it comes to speaking English. So she's able to sort of point out certain things,
Yeah, for sure.
And I think that just might help with the sentence structure, the syntax, and again, these are mistakes I make myself,
Yeah, I totally understand. It's pretty, I don't know, hadn't really, it was a bit rushed and not backed up with references and stuff, so. I get you.
No, so if I just had sort of picked up, have you got what you sent me in front of you?
Pardon? Yeah. Yep. Got it here.
Yeah, so sort of page 6.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I just thought, it was just the writing of just sort of things like, so even that first line, many Australians have a strong personal connections to gambling, as do I. I would just leave as do I out. So it's sort of like many Australians have strong personal connections to gambling. Mm-hmm. It is embedded in our society and memories and experience. So it's just the formulation,
Sure.
I understand why you've written it in a reflexive sense, but I don't think you need it to. It distracts from maybe the subject matter.
Sure.
And I think there's a time then for that subjectivity to come in. So it's not. I'm not suggesting it doesn't come in. It's just how.
Yeah.
So that it's just one example of the first two sentences. It would be more like many Australians have strong personal connections to gambling. It is embedded in our society, memories and experience. And that's maybe where somebody else is a second reader.
Sure.
And even that, as a young child, I remember Memby Bird. I remember and so there's also this repetition. I remember trips. So just again, how you formulate that. And you could use that as something to sort of almost poetically to describe something.
Mm-hmm.
But you need to make the sort of intentionality around that needs to be clear, which it isn't. So is it just, in a way, excuse me, not maybe the best way written, or is it intended,
Yeah.
And just to sort of say on those first two paragraphs, they just feel like they're more part of an introduction rather than in chapter 1.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought even that actually how you write about from childhood, that even some of that, like sometimes, Henry, in terms, even if you can imagine where we open up a thesis,
mm-hmm.
and maybe there's like a screen grab from your phone, which you use later, that's the first thing maybe we see.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe whether, depending how this is printed, if it's one page or the other, or facing pages, what if you use actually, as a young child, I remember many birthdays, and you reformulate and redraft this, but it's some sort of introduction. Or as an anecdote before even the introduction. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. And I think the thing that I've been struggling most with when it comes to the writing is actually not too much. Like, I know I've got the materials, I just need to figure out, need to do it, but the structure of what to put where, and like what is a chapter 1, what is a chapter 2, and yeah.
But I do think so. For that, most of that first paragraph could be like almost like a memory, and does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I think, the use of the I, the first person, so you need to just think about that, and that's like we're drafting with writing,
Mm-hmm.
So I think that needs a bit, as it were, labour. And so even then in my late teens, I've been trying. So it could be some sort of, I was curious about as to why gambling seemed to have much more persuaded than any other country I'd visited. I mean, it could be even that first bit is some sort of anecdote, and then it comes into an introduction,
Yeah.
Okay. Just this also sort of, just to give an example too, what I mean about this thing, if again we can look at the second paragraph starting with in my late teens.
Yeah.
I had the privilege of traveling, living abroad during my time abroad. So it's this repetition. Usually writing, we don't do that because people go, oh, right, you've used abroad in two seconds, and it's just distracting from what one wants to. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
So this is what I mean about the sort of syntax.
Mm-hmm.
And even if I go further on then in this second paragraph, on one hand I understand gambling is a culture of pastime, and again there's a spelling, pastime is 2 T's.
Mm-hmm.
I know it can be rewarding, fun and exciting. On the other hand, I'm aware that gambling can be harmful and addictive, and that'd be one of those as an example. How do you know this?
Yeah.
How do you say this? Okay, and whether you need to. So if we say that first paragraph is more around childhood and memories of that, and then into this introduction, as part of that introduction, do you have to phrase those as questions, as research questions, rather than statements and assertions?
Okay, yeah.
Okay, because even first, I believe that in recent decades, gambling in Western society has been through a process of normalization and mass gambling as through mobile sports, etc. Again, how do you know this? Okay? Okay?
Yeah. Okay.
So I think that, references or whether you just, you phrase what you do rather than you turn them into questions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. It's just.
So rather than so you just kind of rather than, and sometimes I found that it can be really, if you just throw it out as, so at this stage you need to sort of, and then through the process of research and through your both do it and actually your field work, you're able to come back to that.
Mm-hmm.
And what the film will address and so forth, right?
Sure.
And at the start of it, you generally can't say, I know what it is. Well, then why do it?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it's funny now, just looking at how ridiculous it is.
No, don't worry. It's
all right. It's just, it just kind of, it's like I've just typed what I've been thinking.
Yeah, exactly. That's what we do. So don't worry about that. Yeah. That's fine. Don't be hard on yourself. That's not the point of what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's all good.
Yeah, okay. The other thing, just what I think of it too, if you could, I'm just one of those people who looks if you can write justify. Do you know what I mean by that? In the formatting of your paragraphs, rather than this sort of, as it were, uneven lines on the right-hand side of the page, if you can just make it all straight. Do you get me?
Yeah.
Is that all right?
Yep.
So just to be mindful of that maybe that first paragraph in page, it could be some sort of anecdotal memory, sort of ethnographic description, okay? That maybe we see if you decide to put the thesis where they're facing pages rather than one after the other, it could be very nice also, okay?
Okay.
And that's the first thing, and then you get into all the things you've laid out afterwards, your chapter titles and introduction, all that sort of stuff, okay?
Yeah.
And then I think for sure the second paragraph would be part of an introduction, but again, just to phrase them as questions.
Mm-hmm.
And then in some ways, you then have to start your chapter 1 with the start of that third.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And that may mean you'll have to reformulate the introduction, the sort of as you introduce that chapter. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Then if we go to chapter 7, actually, hold on for a minute, page 7.
Page 7, yep.
Okay. I think the whole top of that, right down as far as traditionally. Okay. When we get to the bottom with traditionally.
Yep.
I think this should all come later because this is actual research into what you're doing.
Okay.
Okay, so I think you need, traditionally in Australia, betting is providing a range of physical and maybe some description of this, and then that material has to come later. Okay. And that's where I would suggest really what you're doing, again, you need to print this out, lay it page by page out on the floor or wherever.
Yeah.
And then start to see, even with a large marker, where stuff can go and needs to be rejigged.
Yeah.
Okay? But definitely there's an evolution. So this is good. So again, I thought this was good. 8, and then we're on to page 9. Okay.
Yep. Page 9. Yep.
Okay. Are you looking at that on the screen?
Sorry. Yeah, I am.
Don't worry about it. No, you don't apologise for it. I just think it's just that sort of thing, just to be. So just to really, after we talk today, I would print it out and ASAP while it's fresh in your head.
Yeah.
You get me? So because I like this first figure 1, the screenshot and so forth. The only thing I would, is just whether an example that could come sooner,
Yeah, and I've got so much of that stuff.
Yeah.
Should I just bulk it?
It could be
put a lot of that in there.
At one point you showed us one where there was a really personalised version of where I knew it was your phone. Do you get me? Like that's your personal computer screening. So maybe we get also one off your phone, which I think you've done as well, which would be great.
Yep.
Those sort of things, Henry. And also that represents the different, as it were, media. If you get me.
Yeah.
Sort of the tablet, laptop, phone. Do you get me?
Yeah.
Just something you reference. I think that'd be good. So, even when I'm talking that very first one, maybe it's your phone,
Yeah, for sure.
Because that's the thing that's with you all the time, generally,
Yeah.
And whether then maybe the screen is towards the start of the chapter, So we think about these things.
Yes.
And again, so I just thought that could be, and again, I just thought, like, you've got a subheading, calls for alternative approaches. Yeah, I'm just not sure what that means in terms of, or whether it's the best subheading, question mark. You can give that some thought. Also, Jenny, with indented quotes, you don't need to put them in italics, okay?
Okay.
What you may need to do is no ... You need to look at that. It's kind of in brackets, capital T in brackets, the field of gambling research. Okay. Generally, no italics.
Okay.
So again, and then at the top of page 10, after that quote, you've got one of the central problems highlighted is that much of gambling is funded by gambling and other players, blah 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 blah. But again, there's no reference.
Yeah.
Okay, so all that sort of stuff. And then even in that paragraph it goes on, it proceeds with an awareness of the dominant disease model of gambling, but again, there's no reference. What is this?
Yeah.
Okay. And then if we go down, continuing, bottom of page 10, again, it's just, you kind of just quickly, from a method perspective, Malaby's detailed of gambling and how to, that has informed much of my approach. But it's just way too little. The book is based on fieldwork carried out between 40 and then it goes into paper. So like we get like about 6 lines about a book that's central to your research.
Yeah.
So you need to expand, and also whether that needs to come later in terms of methodology. Okay, and also with pair bins. So it could be, because if you think about it, again, going back to when we first talked about, what you want to do is walk the reader who knows nothing, through the landscape of your research process.
Yeah.
And so some ways that first chapter kind of gives the macro theoretical, right?
Yeah.
And it's not to become formulaic about this, but I just think sometimes that helps with making sense of these things. The chapter 2, as you write, is around methodology. So even in that first chapter, you can reference these people, but maybe, and you can always say, and I will return to a bigger discussion in the next chapter. Okay?
Yeah.
But it needs sort of more linking to the sort of big sort of macro theoretical description that you're talking about. Okay?
Yeah.
And then also at the bottom of the second chapter, or first chapter on top of page 11, just mark beginning of developing the conceptual framework for this project. Stop. Chapter 2, methodology. Now, I know you were sending me a draft, okay, and stuff.
Yeah.
But we need to link it better, in some ways. Having now provided an overview, in my next chapter I will. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So linking. Also then chapter 2, new page.
Okay.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, just to, I would say just to, because this also provides a visual pause and so forth, okay?
Sure.
And again, I know this is only a draft, but even to start a chapter with, before reading Binder, I was yet to come across concepts in the discourse and gambling that supported the understanding I gained from my own personal experiences. Well, how can you say this before we've even gone into the research process and so forth? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like you've booked, you're almost at the finish line and actually you're going backwards. Does that make sense?
Kind of, yes. I guess. Okay.
So you need to raise those questions, those sort of things. How do you know this? And I was even saying, can you say this at this stage? Question.
Yeah.
And also, is this the way to start the chapter?
Mm-hmm.
Is there another way to sort of introduce this? Instead of before reading, is it Binder?
I don't know.
Okay.
I'm not sure. It's Swedish, so
okay,
I've never heard his name said.
Yeah, Binder. Again, just some of the things on the bottom, like the last paragraph on page 11, whether that could come earlier, And again, there's a lot of this in this chapter, and again, I know you put through this because I'd asked you to, but again, that question, how do you know this?
Yeah.
Because we're only getting into it, I think, in that, the last paragraph on page 11, Henry, it says, this practice-led anthropological research project the syntax has remained open to reshaping as it has proceeded. Again, it just seems a bit early to talk like that, because we haven't even got into your field sites, who your collaborators are, and so forth,
Yeah.
So just be mindful of those sort of statements. And if I go on chapter 12, or page 12, and again, you kind of just give me a listing of work. So again, we get into Ulrich Beck's the Risk Society and so forth.
Yeah.
And again, it's largely beneficial. So, there's like a bunch of type, boom, 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 but there's no real description. You need to expand related to how it has informed your methodological approach. Could something like also Beck come in the earlier chapter?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I think.
And also the power of the habit. It sounds like that could come also in chapter 1,
Okay. So yeah, that's just where I get confused as to where to bring. I know I'm trying not to be formulaic, but I end up just being random and not knowing where to put things.
Yeah.
But I think that Martin Young and his kind of comparison or application of the Risk Society is going to be something that I'll really expand on and talk about, because it's kind of begun to kind of inform the way I've been thinking about it.
Yeah.
Like when I've been
so
interviewing.
Again, chapter 1, Henry, I think that would be really good. Okay. I think, and I think also too, some of this court writing, it sounds like, and it doesn't mean that you can't bring back in then relation to the methodological later. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you can flag and then I return it to in terms of how to inform my methodology in chapter 2. I think that would only add to the description, okay?
Yeah.
And remember too, I know that what obviously the benefit is that there's been sort of limited sort of visual media anthropology research done in terms of what you're doing.
Yeah.
But again, also remember too, you're not trying to reinvent the wheel. It's kind of like how with the limitations of a 10,000 word thesis is 8 to 10,000 words is not it's not a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So how does that make sense?
Yeah.
So and also if the material doesn't fit into the body of the chapter, then you footnote it. That's the great thing about footnotes or endnotes, that they which you've been using, that actually how this relates, But I think this, Per Binder, obviously I think he's important, so I think, that could be also centrally expanded a bit more, as also the work that you referenced in the first chapter by Malaby, that should become Malaby and then maybe Perbinda. And even if you have only those two as sort of central methodological and ethnographic, brilliant. That's fine in terms of the size of pieces that you're doing.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? That would suffice, absolutely. If you were doing a PhD or something like that, or an MRes where it's a 25,000 word essay, then maybe it would be something a bit more extensive. But just even those two key references, I think, would be great.
Sure.
Okay, and then how that relates and informs what you're doing. Yeah, obviously, you know.
Yeah.
So I thought also that after that, and like, you know, how you've written before, like about preparing, this was all good, and the rest on page 12 and so forth. And again, remember, just there's no need when indented. When the quote's indented, there's no inverted commas and there's no italics. Okay.
No worries.
And again, this is with embeddings in young males' experiences. And again, I think you could expand a little bit of this about who your subjects were, okay? I mean, actually, what you've done well on page 12 before we get into field studies, you finally phrase them as questions.
Okay, yeah.
And you may think about, is that the place for them, or elements of that, or some of that comes earlier, okay, Henry?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then what you do is link, and then having identified this, I now want to describe, you know, in terms of the field work, and, you know, it seems to me, can you use the word field site? Is that appropriate to what you're doing, or is it sort of, you know, is it informants in, you know, you can think about this. We construct the field site, right?
Yeah.
So it seems to me, you know, are all of them in the town that you are, or is also somebody in Sydney?
Yeah, so I think I think that's me trying to be formulaic when I just don't know how to phrase the way that I've done this.
Yeah, no, don't worry about that. We construct the field site. This is something Michael Boer away and something I wrote in PhD. We construct the field site as something we construct. So you need to just define that actually the group or whatever, they're based in the region of New South Wales, right? Sort of and you can describe that geographically, you know, and it needs to be more fluid, and that somehow that relates to the sort of mobility of the technology you're dealing with as well, right?
Yeah.
So you can phrase it that way, you know, and you can still say it's strategically situated.
Yeah.
You know, so you can argue that, and don't be afraid to, you know, because it's what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So I would take confidence from that actually that is actually what you're doing. So, you know, it may not be single site, but it's strategically situated. I would, you know, you could say I'm going to apply that term, and this is why.
Okay.
And also too, you might want to look at what's her name? Just a second. She's up in Aarhus. Just a second.
No worries. forgotten
her name. She's an anthropologist up in. Just give me a second.
That's all right.
That's all right. There's also something, have a look at Christine Hine.
Mm-hmm.
Hine, and she has Ethnography for the Internet, Embedded, Embodied, and Everyday, from 2015.
Yep.
Christine Hine. And the person I was thinking about too, which I think you'll find really good, is if she's on Academia, you know Academia?
Yep.
Her name is Annette, Annette.
Mm-hmm.
Markham, Markham.
Yep.
And she's got, I think if you find it, it's called Ethnography in the Digital Era, From Fields to Flows.
Sure.
Descriptions to Interventions. Okay, and she only put that up in January of this year.
Cool.
Okay, so I'd absolutely just a second. Just a second, man, because I think she's kind of, I shouldn't, off the record.
Yeah.
It's that, the world we find ourselves in now, I'm not into territorialism anymore, or really, I try to bury the ego.
Yeah.
Because we're trying to push against something, and the world is in a desperate place. But there are those who would, who kind of, how do I put this? Maybe make it territorial in an academic sense because they're trying to push career.
Yeah.
However, what they write is useful to us.
Sure.
So, I shouldn't say I'm including this woman in this, but people we know may know her. Here's one I'm sending you.
Cool.
And,
thank you.
Because I think she'd be very useful for you. Okay.
Mhm.
In terms of your methodology, I think she's, it's kind of what you're dealing with, here we go. I think actually it's totally appropriate to what you're doing. And I was working with students in Ireland, and it was the same thing. He was using Skype conversations as part of his methods. But this is totally. Can you see those?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, great. So Henry, so Annette Markham, I would, and I think this will totally feed in, man. Okay.
Cool. Yeah.
And even if you don't throw through that, a great thing, but just even, you plunder. Okay. It's what you do with your theft, right? It's Jim Jarmusch. Okay. Yeah. There's no originality. It's authenticity. So it's how we celebrate our theft. Okay.
Sure.
And in the end, it's for good. So, so I think I would have a look, and that might help then in terms of that sort of describing the field site. And again, I know you were sending this to me in terms of what it was. It was nice to see the pictures and what you're doing.
Yeah.
Great, and Jaden's highlighted this and stuff. So this is all good. Do you get me?
Yeah.
Again, that just needs to be expanded and more rightly as body of the pieces. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I think, the personal reflections and biases and so forth, I know what you're talking about here. I think the Gustafson thing might be appropriate.
Yeah.
Because I like the way he talks about sort of my diversity across sites, so this may also be, and you could sort of say that this is still argued from Marcus, dear Marcus, and strategically situated and picked description. So does that make sense?
Yeah, and did you...
Sorry, and that's kind of the methodological, and then remember that your methods are different, right?
Yeah.
So then you list off exactly what you did.
I was just, what I was trying to say was that not only using that polymorphous engagement as methodological, but also like when I'm putting this visual moving image together, using that kind of idea of getting all these different things, and I suppose that's where like this Annette Markham stuff might help as well. But kind of.
But also comes back to like they all, they take literally, they use vocabulary to sort of get provides whatever currency. Okay, provides career currency sometimes. Mm-hmm. So because I really like Gustafson and what he writes. I find polymorphous engagement a mouthful.
Yeah.
And for me, it just seems an evolution of the idea of multivocality and montage, which George Marcus first and then Pink adapted.
Yeah.
So in some ways, one could argue is also multivocality. Okay, so don't be afraid of that.
Yeah.
It's also appropriate that it's also acknowledging the different registers. So that's what I mean. I'm kind of less interested in the territorialism of academic currency,
Yeah.
theoretical currency, and then just how we use these things and appropriate them and evolve ideas, you know?
Yeah.
So, which is, you know, sometimes not the best thing if you want to make a career, but you have to that's a sort of philosophical decision.
Yeah.
But so it's kind of, you know, drawing on those legacies of, you know, is it actually an evolution? You know, what's different from multivocality other than maybe because it also talks about fluid flexibility and so forth, you know, flows, etc., you know?
Yeah.
Because the word flows even originally comes from notions of capital rather than digital, you know? So it's all those things.
Yeah.
So, so just to be mindful of that. So don't get too, you know, so some clarity as well without getting overly
hung up on it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I mean, you know. It's in the doing and stuff like that, you know.
Sure.
But I think that sets out quite well, and even the photo 2, and then I think chapter 3 has got really what you did and what's come out and why it looks like it does and what your research outcome will be, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And remember, the thesis is and of, they're about each other, okay? Because, you know, what I'm trying to argue for is that even the film that you'll make, it's embodied knowledge, you know? It is academic in and of itself.
Yeah.
They're not two separate things. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, you know, that's how they speak to each other. So it could be that, you know, you've already done where you've got that still of yourself, but maybe then in the next chapter, you know, you maybe actually show stills from what you produce with your collaborator and actually describe them.
Yeah.
Okay, so like the chapter I just wrote was about the first project. It's almost 20 years ago, so it's very nice to be able to go back and reflect on that, but hopefully out being revisionist.
Yeah.
But even in that, I include, and it was solely photographic, this project. It's the only solely photographic project I did.
Yeah.
But even within that, I included images and I actually describe them, because then I'm talking about the role of allegory. So actually, I give descriptions that relate to what I was thinking at the time in terms of the allegorical. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You know, so, you know, there's an image of a wall, and actually a work is inscribed in chalk home. So like where that happened, it was an unfinished apartment block. I'm trying to walk across, trying not to trip over cables, and then I see first a red mark, and then I slowly recognize, because it's very faint, the word home. And I literally describe that scene, you know?
Yeah.
So it could be, you know, even in your description, it's like you include some of those descriptions, maybe your first encounter, you know, you and Jaden or some of the other people, you know, so it started with a phone call, or some of the based in friendships without necessarily betraying identities. You know, does that make sense? So you actually locate the reader. You know, it's like what I was thinking, that first description of you remember as a child, it kind of immediately cites the reader sort of in that childhood memory.
Yeah.
And sort of gives the impetus for what you're doing now, you know, so it's very descriptive.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? It's very manipulative, but it's based in terms of actually how it's informed, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So again, these are really useful devices. So including even stills and literally describing why it is that's included and what's, you know, what literally one sees, you know?
Yeah. Cool.
Does that make sense? I watched the film you sent me too, so...
Yeah, I was just thinking, not, I don't know, it's the technique more than anything.
Yeah, sure.
Like using, because I think that might be just, it's the only way I can think of that can tell the story and all the embodied knowledge, like by telling it through my own story a little bit, and then that way, I don't know, I think it would be much, because at the end of the day, like, people need to be able to, like, I really need to be quite explicit, like, this is what it is, this is where I am, this is the background, because otherwise, you know, some people don't even know what gambling is. So...
But if I could say to you, I would trust the audience too. So, like, I even think I agree with you. This way, your voice, like, if I heard somebody with a voiceover going, as a young child, I remember many birthdays where I received lottery tickets or scratch cards from friends or relatives.
Yeah.
That's it. You don't need to say anything else. This already starts to.
Yeah.
I mean, what, you know. So, you know, you don't even, it's not like you've got to go on the next line. So, as a child, the sort of culture of gambling was already impressed on me.
Yeah, definitely.
Does that make sense? So that's where that sort of
And that's what I'm thinking of, yeah.
opens, but it's very clear what's going on.
Yeah. And then I think I can, from there, I'll be able to, through the interview footage and through just introduce the characters, but also help tell a larger story about what the situation that each of us face, but also all of us face. The kind of...
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Hello, Henry?
Hello. That's better, I think.
Hey, man. Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. No, you're really clear, actually. So I have to give you a deadline for September 1st, and we have to keep to it, Henry, okay?
Yeah.
Because that's the day when I also start back in Ireland, and then things will get very busy, and I have an exhibition at the end of September in France.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, I'm going to be really busy that middle couple of weeks in September anyway, and then I'll be coming over, so...
Yeah, because the deadline. So this is why I always said it's September 1st. We have to keep September 1st, not the 7th. It has to be September 1st, okay?
Yeah.
Because I've been really clear, you're not alone in terms of, also with Valerie.
Yeah.
And what I need to get is pretty much a full draft of everything.
Okay.
And I also would like to see sort of even a rough cut of what you're hoping to do.
Yeah. Well, I hope to have it by then too, so...
Yeah, so just even if it's not completely resolved, but just even that there's also... Because how long are you thinking the film will be? Even now, nobody told me, roughly.
I think I don't really want it to be longer than 15 minutes.
15?
I don't know, they've told us 15 to 30 minutes, but I don't even think it should be that long, I'm not sure.
Okay. See how that goes, because it depends on how much, in terms of the conversations you've been having. Because again, that's one thing I want to say within the chapters, that to include transcripts of conversations, extracts, and discuss those like you would the images.
Yeah.
And do you get me? And how that relates and can inform the sort of even theoretical description,
Yeah, so I think for this, it could be, for the MA, it should be like 10 to 15 minutes maybe, and it should be really clear and concise, and then from the interviews I can, if I want to, or if I think it's necessary, I can use, the interview stuff to make longer form or separate stuff,
Because I'll give you an example. It's like, I think, was it last year or was it 2 years ago? God, I can't remember if Greg was last year. Like Greg did the football, the sort of the queer movement within sort of Premiership football.
He sent it to me, but then the permissions got lost, so I haven't seen it. But I'll ask him for it again.
Yeah, no. My only observation would be, and like I thought. I mean, I know that actually said later that whatever it was edited, but I thought it was too short.
Okay.
So just to be mindful of that it was only beginning and then suddenly it was over. And it was one of those where, so just to be mindful that there's different versions where you, have that shortened version.
Yeah.
It could be 10, 15 minutes, and then also, the possibility that something like this could be, a half an hour.
Yeah.
The time, and remember playing with sort of what happens if the screen goes white or black or whatever like that, and we just hear the voices, these sort of strategies,
Yeah.
When most people sort of gambling is it through the day at night time? What if I suddenly have I see sort of darkened in a darkened room, and I only, I don't see the screen, but the light, sort of whatever. There are means where then we hear the voice,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd be just thinking these sort of things, so where, so just to be mindful of that.
Yeah.
It's about a message, but also in terms of that ethnographic description, it's getting an understanding of the people's lives who you've, your experiences, and then those who've collaborated with you, their experiences, getting a sense of that.
Yeah, sure.
Just to be mindful of that.
Definitely.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I mean, it runs, by bringing myself into it, I think I run the risk of making it, about me So I really need to try and not do
Yeah.
that.
But it's about that multivocality where you're maybe one voice among the others, you know. But I can see where that first line, I remember as a young child, I remember many birthdays, and then we go into something.
Yeah.
And then, you know, some whatever, and then it's other people's voice, and then it's another, you know, it could be, I remember when the Melbourne Cup horse came around every year, parents and other family members would back a horse in my name in the sweepstake. They'd run with their colleagues or friends. And then we go into another description, do you get me? I remember trips to the horse and greyhound racing tracks with friends for play days.
Yeah.
Also to be jockeying horses or spectating and having a pint from the dog. And then we go into something else, you know? So there's kind of like, if you use that I remember as some sort of where we hear your voice all the way through, you know? These are the sort of strategies in amongst the other voices of your collaborators.
Yeah.
These are the sort of things. And remember, even that you making this is a gesture, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? So actually your presence already, by the fact you're even doing it, is a gesture on your part.
Yes.
That even exist is a gesture on your part.
Definitely.
I mean, I can see how that works, because you do use this, I remember. Yeah, and 3 times actually. I was kind of, and I kind of, no, but it wasn't, because I kind of read it that way, and that sort of.
Yeah, and I guess that's what I guess I see those images quite clearly as something that could be really powerful. You know, even if I go back to the dog track and get a shot of the little hut that I used to sit in, or the dogs going around or whatever, you know.
It could be, yeah, but also too, sometimes we don't do it. It's already in my head. I didn't need to see that already when I read this.
Yeah. It could be something else. Yeah, you don't need to describe what's being seen.
No, I think I may have told you, my mother's family were the largest bookmakers in Dublin when I grew up.
Yeah.
Turf accountants. So, it was a church like Kilmartin. So this was where I read, and they were, goodness where all that money went. But, so they were like, the name was known in Dublin,
Yeah.
because of, so I grew up too with a mother who was passionate about horse racing.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyway, so just to say, so there's an element where it already, but even despite that, I can already imagine, so this is, I think even people who don't, so maybe that, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Could be, but anyway, just do all the things you're thinking and see what comes out of this,
Sure.
I mean, it could be that you do this sort of cut, whatever, but maybe it doesn't need to be so bang, 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 bang,
Yeah.
I think, if I think already about it, there's some of the words of collaborators, if and then it maybe cuts to screens to, God, Samuel L. Jackson, what are you doing? It was Samuel L., wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that killed me. It just killed me. It's like, man, your people, your community, fuck's sakes. So, but it's like Billy Connolly,
Yeah.
So, Scotland, win a little, win a lotto. Oh, fuck off, Billy. I really love Billy Connolly. It's just like, how can you do that, man? It's aimed at poor people, where you're from,
Yeah.
So, somebody who's very political, which he is, as is Samuel now. But, so this is kind of, anyway.
Everyone has a price, I guess.
This could work in terms of the film, without it necessarily having to be bang, bang, bang. Does that make sense? Just to be mindful of that, or a mix of it,
Yeah, and I guess...
So, might need stillness and quietness and pauses, and that's where maybe,
Yeah, for sure. And even when you say that, it just reminds me of talking to Mr. X last week,
right.
And kind of, I don't know, I confronted him a little more about, how,
Okay.
like just about, what do you actually think of what you do? Like, do you...
Yeah.
And, he talked about it, as being like McDonald's,
Yeah.
which is also what that guy Courtright talks about, the McDonaldization of gambling.
And how did he relate it to McDonald's, Mr. X?
Well, he said, I'm selling this, gambling to people, but, fast food companies sell this terrible shit to kids. It's the same thing. Sure, I'm not going to say I haven't thought about it, but if I don't do it, someone else is going to do it, you know.
So there's that globalization and normal, all those sort of things we've talked about, Henry. So I think all this stuff is really, really rich. Do you hear me?
Yeah.
So I think sometimes it's just being mindful that like I watched the clip and I would, you know, and I can see where even what you showed of April could be I remember the child, and then we get that sort of crazy intro for about a minute or something.
Yeah.
And then it goes into quiet, you know, and sort of you can hear these voices where it's like, we don't need to see the person, you know, well, this is what I do. And is he happy for that stuff, the audio to be broadcast?
Yeah, yeah.
Right. So it's like whether, you know, Sunday, whatever, and then we cut to other, you know, I could see how, you know, that sort of mad, sort of whatever edit could also come into more side observational footage that maybe it is of the empty ground where you went as a child.
Yeah.
Alongside other locations. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Hovering over the apparatus in which people sort of encounter. So just to be, I think trying to enjoy this as well, you know, I think this could be so rich, you know?
Yeah.
It'll take a lot of work, I appreciate that. But just, I think, you know, and don't forget, when you send me again in September in terms of the audiovisual material, it's only a draft, you know, even if it's to give me just a sense.
Yeah.
Give me, say, I've only 5 minutes, I've decided it's going to be 25. That's fine, Henry.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
What I need to more see is that just to move along, so you have time to focus on that, is just to get the in some ways, the sort of writing out most of that close, okay?
Yeah.
Does that make, yeah, you with me?
Yeah, I'm with that.
And I know you say, like, in terms of maybe with work, I'd be just trying to give yourself time in September, October, so you can get this finished and be able to focus, okay?
Yeah, I think I'm just trying to just...
Yeah, I would try and do that as best you can, that you kind of not... I understand you may not be able to completely clear the decks, but as much as possible.
And I tried to do it this month, but it's just but I'm definitely just trying to finish up what I'm doing now, and hopefully I'll have enough money to just
focus on the because I would try and do, because in terms of like these next, particularly August, September, you know, they're critical to this, and also in terms of you know what when we do something, other stuff happens because of it. Okay, that's all I can say. You know.
Yeah.
That in some ways, sometimes we can't even imagine now, but you know, other possibilities come out of that investment at that time and that energy. Okay.
Sure.
Okay. And how did it go this week? Did you mention your conference?
Yeah, it went pretty well. It was not a massive crowd, but yeah, I co-authored a paper that came out of another one that I did for Mike's Space and Place class about Pokemon.
Okay.
And, yeah, one of my dad's colleagues asked me if I'd like to do one with him, and
okay, fantastic.
Yeah, and we kind of presented it with a bit of drone video side by side with his avatar walking through the game and stuff. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah, so it's good. It's like I met some, you know, when you say things come from other things, the university I went to for my undergrad, I met a guy there and he was like, oh, you did the 360 videos for the thing. I said, yeah. He said, oh, well, you know, I've referenced you in my paper, which I'm doing 360 videos for. So I'm like, okay, that's pretty cool.
That is great.
But it's nice to hear that, you know, that university that, you know, I might even think about going to again are open to this idea of using the visual.
Great. Especially if you're thinking of going on. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay, great. And that's why I think, man, listen, seriously, if you can, try and clear the date, August, September, get this done and do it well. Do you hear me?
Yeah, I just need to pull.
There's only feedback into this. Even if you to beg, borrow, steal, and say, look, can you loan me some money and then I'll pay, you know? Do you get me?
Yeah.
That would be my tokens worth, Henry, if you can.
Will do. Just need to do it. Need to do the work.
Yeah, because you've got the material and all the stuff is there, and I think I understand sometimes, but then you sort of go, right, for this period, if I can, I just try and be able to focus and buy the time, as it were.
Yeah.
Okay, I really think it's important. And my instinct is this will only come back to you. Like, that sort of experience, that's kind of what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. All right.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm good. I just need to do it.
Yeah. Do you have any questions?
Not really. I mean, I think it is just mostly down to just rushing and just trying to get you something when I haven't really done much of the writing up. But I guess I would, if you, I know you you don't want it to be formulaic or anything, but if you can think of any, I think Samuli's guidelines have been really helpful, but something that really kind of would just help me structure what goes where.
But I think I think it's that sort of, chapter 1 macro theoretical.
Mm-hmm.
Chapter 2 is the methodological methods.
Yeah.
And then chapter 3, I think it's what you did.
Okay.
And what you've been doing. And then maybe chapter 3, or maybe there's chapter 4 about what's come out of that and why.
Mm-hmm.
So you talk about the post-production, editing, stuff like that, or that could also be combined with chapter 3, and then that's it.
Yeah, okay.
And I think, having started out, I think I said this to when we all first met, my PhD, I was going to write fragmentedly, and my supervisor said, look, Mark, that's great, but, you might go mad.
Yeah.
What he was trying to do is not to be sort of traditional. Even if you think about how we're talking about placing images, maybe that little description before we even get in, we're already mucking. Even if you print this where the pages face each other, we're already breaking convention.
Yeah.
So it's not being traditional, it's not being conservative.
Sure.
So I think we'll hold on to that.
Mm-hmm.
But actually with that structure, it helps kind of make sense.
Sure.
And what you've sent me, I can see that you're already, how you're laying this out. There's a structure already in place,
Sure.
I didn't answer your question, but that's what I mean in terms of with that in mind, then what I would do is I'd print out what you have.
Yeah.
Even today, okay, I know your time, but maybe tomorrow, I would really just take an hour, print out an hour, and then and start to just think about what we talked about and actually what maybe could go where.
Sure.
And then thinking about, right, so suddenly in this chapter 2, I've mentioned Markham, so suddenly you just add the name Markham to Binda and is it Malbury, the other ethnographic research that you referenced.
Malaby.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does that make sense in terms of chapter 2? And then it's, and then in terms of maybe thinking a little bit more about with that too, how that maybe informs how you describe your field site, and then who your collaborators are, and then literally list the methods, which is sort of, appropriating, downloading material, found material, conversations, interviews, deciding which is which, the use of audiovisual material, and you literally list them,
Yeah.
Did I send you my PhD?
I don't think so.
Yeah, okay, hold on. I'll send you a link to not that you need to read it all, but just there's just a second here. Okay. Sorry, second.
That's all right.
But just as a chapter in the, as will happen a lot of these times, Henry, is that sometimes you do something and I feel now it's already dated. However, in the methodology chapter, in the, I'll just see if you, tell me if you can see this. You able to open that up?
I'll just
be over here, and you'll see PhD final draft.
Yeah.
Can you open that?
I just need to sign in.
Oh, right, sorry.
That's alright. It says it doesn't exist.
Ah, right. Can I not share that with you? Oh my god, where did I do that? Hold on. Let's get it over here. Account on. Just give me a second.
No worries.
Oh, no, we're done. It's done something. Oh, oh my god. It says I don't exist. Oh, I don't know. Okay, what? Oh, what? I'm rather confused by this.
That's alright.
It won't let me share my own. Why won't it let me share, Henry? You're good with this stuff.
I'm not too good on the Dropbox. I'm not sure. Can you open it up on there?
Yeah, it's only just saying. Yeah, no, it's saying it's here. My desktop.
How big is it?
Well, the file itself, the file itself it's 174 megabytes. This is images and all that sort of stuff. But just give me. Why won't it let me share the folder with you? Because I've shared it before.
Sure. So it's already on Dropbox.
So I don't know. Yeah. Like usually there's a copy link, you know?
Yeah.
And it won't let me do this.
I'm not sure.
So when you click on that link, it just says it doesn't exist.
Yeah. It logs me in and then says PhD 2012 doesn't exist.
Oh, right. Okay. Okay. What I'll do is I'll try and I'll try and figure it out and I'll send it to you later. Okay.
No worries.
I don't know what's doing that.
I'll send you this site. Have you used WeTransfer before?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I just sent it to you, but I suppose you can do it like that if you run out. All right. Well.
That's it.
You there? Sorry.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. I think I just need to get my head down and get stuck into it. And figure it all out.
All right. What I do is this.
No, I'll try and do this in a minute anyway. I can't. Just this is frustrating. It's when I get annoyed with technology. All right, man. Well, listen. Do you have any more questions? I want to do. I'll send it to you, and you'll see in terms of the sort of layout in terms of maybe sort of possibilities. You get me?
Yeah. I guess just the other thing is like, so the methodology is like should be more about the past, ethnographic works related to this, and then
that's what what's informing your method? Like methodology is theoretical.
Yeah. So
is it position? So like multivocally montage, or indeed studying up. Polymorphous engagement, and then methods is actually the methods that you actually do, the process itself.
Yeah,
so methods are not the same thing.
Yeah, but my main methodologies don't have to be the ethnographic per se ones, do they? Like I can say if I was to write quite a bit about the Risk Society and.
That's chapter 1 though, man. That's more the sort of theoretical in terms of the sort of the structure of this system.
Yeah. Okay.
And if I think about what Mr. X just said, that feeds into sort of your theoretical position that you're already proposing in that chapter 1.
Okay.
So that's where you put a little transcript or a little clip extract from that to talk about that.
Yeah. So that's more just like the.
No, methodology is. You got to remember, ethnography is the process of research.
Yeah.
So it would seem to me that that's central to your methodology.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you're going to be talking about in chapter 2, again, to sort of make sense of that.
Yeah.
Okay, so like in some ways, chapter 1 is the sort of bigger sort of theoretical in terms of economic structures, the role of technology, these sort of things. And I think that's also what's missing maybe in chapter 1 too, is that we talk about how the interface of this, which is, primarily through, the technology of, the laptop, the tablet or the phone. And I think you need to reference the use of that in chapter 1.
Mm-hmm.
And then in terms of what the Markham talks about in chapter 2 in terms of methodology and methods.
Sure.
And that way you kind of flag it also, okay?
Yeah.
It's the means in which that, And so that also then feeds into why, your field side is the sort of fluid field side that it is,
Sure. Yeah, I think that, I get that now.
Do you get that, Henry?
Yeah, that's just what I was kind of mixing up the kind of larger, bigger ideas with the ethnographic.
Ethnography is a process of research. In a traditional sense, ethnography is a process of research, but its theoretical description it takes from anthropology.
Yeah.
So anthropology provides literally theoretical description.
Sure.
But ethnography is a process of research. That's where sometimes you see artists, sociologists using ethnography.
Sure.
But they don't, in terms of... But then the theoretical description they take maybe from sociology, political science, or if you're a visual artist or whatever,
Yeah.
So people can use ethnography. So, generally most anthropologists use ethnography, but not all ethnographers use anthropology.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's important to keep that. It's a process of research.
Okay.
It's not a theoretical position as such. A political position because it's about engagement and a commitment, as Lisa Gill talks about, but it's not in and itself necessarily a theoretical position. That draws from other things like political science, sociology, anthropology, visual media anthropology.
Sure.
Okay. So that's what you need to be clear in your head.
Mm-hmm.
So even when I talk about so within that. So for me, I still talk about, more recently this project about studying up as a methodological position, because that's a theoretical position in terms of methodology.
Mm-hmm.
And then my methods are sort of still in some ways, Guston talks about polymorphous, but I would still see the sort of from, you know, the sort of algorithmic to the voices, the multivocality in montage, okay?
Yeah.
There's a role for that too, and then the sort of, you know, the methods within that.
Sure.
Does that make sense, Henry?
That does make a lot of sense now.
Okay.
Okay.
No, I know people still seem to get this mixed up. It's funny. You're not alone in that.
Yeah. So, I got it. Got it now.
Does that make sense? In some ways, it's kind of like that drone thing. In some ways, chapter 1, in some very simplistic way, it's kind of that macro overview.
Yeah.
And then as the chapter goes on, we kind of get closer and closer in, you know?
Sure.
As the chapters progress. And then, you know, what you did. And then maybe at the end, you can sort of talk again about the sort of bigger picture. So it kind of zooms back out again. Does that make sense?
Sure.
From that experience, from that research experience and process.
Mm-hmm.